So now let's look at the steps of urine formation. You'll see that there are 4 steps involved here. Step 1 consists of glomerular filtration. So this is where we're going to remove filtrate from the glomerulus, this ball of capillaries that is sitting inside of this renal corpuscle here. And that filtrate will be removed from the capillaries, remember, because there's a higher pressure of blood coming in to this afferent arteriole than there is leaving from the efferent arteriole. And so the high pressure is going to help push filtrate out of this glomerulus, out of these capillaries, into this renal corpuscle, where it will be collected and then sent along those renal tubules. So that filtrate is going to consist of not only waste materials, which is what we're trying to remove using the urinary system, but it will also consist of things that are useful, things like water, glucose, certain types of electrolytes. And so a lot of those will have to be reabsorbed during step 2 from the filtrate. So tubular reabsorption is where we remove useful solutes from the filtrate and return them back into the blood within these peritubular capillaries. After we've reabsorbed the useful substances, we can then have tubular secretion. This is where we can remove any additional waste from the capillaries that maybe we missed during the filtration process, and add them back into this filtrate here. And then step 4 consists of water conservation. This is where we remove any excess water that we would like to retain in the body and return it to the bloodstream, as well as concentrate the waste into the form of urine, which can then be sent along the ureters to the bladder to be stored until we can remove it from the body. So in this video, we're really going to focus on glomerular filtration, and then we'll talk about the other steps in later videos. So what is glomerular filtration? Again, this is where water and some solutes in the blood plasma are going to be filtered out of the glomerular capillaries into that nephron's capsular space. And then once that filtrate gets filtered out, obviously, eventually we will want to reabsorb the beneficial molecules that are in that filtrate. But remember, that filtrate is going to contain not only waste materials, not only nitrogenous waste, but also some potential good materials that we might want to reabsorb later. So things like water, certain types of electrolytes like sodium, potassium, chloride, glucose, which is our sugar source that we use for ATP production. Certain types of fatty acids might be present, certain types of amino acids might be present, and certain types of vitamins. So a lot of those things we will want to reabsorb in a later step. But all of these materials will pass through what we call the filtration membrane, which we will look at in just a second. While large items like red blood cells, white blood cells, large proteins, all of those are going to be held back and stay in the blood. They're not going to exit the glomerulus and get into this filtrate that we are forming. If you do happen to see proteins or large cells in the blood, like red blood cells for instance, that could indicate that you either have problems with high blood pressure, which is causing you to force more materials through that filtration membrane than you should be, or if you're seeing things like red blood cells, things like that, it could indicate that you have a severe, kidney infection of some kind or some kind of damage within the kidneys. So let's look at this glomerular filtration membrane. And in this picture, you can see the capillary membrane over here in this pink color. You can see it's made of this simple squamous epithelium, and there are filtration pores in between the cells of this epithelial membrane that can allow materials to pass through. So some relatively large materials can pass through these filtration pores, but for the most part it's going to keep really large objects like red blood cells, white blood cells, and certain types of proteins from being able to pass through those filtration pores. Once the materials come through the filtration pores, they should then be able to pass through this basement membrane. And finally, after the basement membrane, they will pass through these filtration slits in between these podocytes. That's the cells that are kind of lining these capillaries here. And once they come through the filtration slits, they can enter into that capsular space where they can then enter into that renal tubule and continue on their path. So this is the filtration membrane here. Again, it's a junction between the capillary membrane and the membrane found within that capsular space, which consists of these podocytes, which have these filtration slits, these slit-like openings, to allow these things like water and electrolytes and glucose, amino acids, those types of materials to be able to pass through while preventing really large molecules or materials like blood cells or proteins from being able to get through the membrane. So filtrate, again, is going to be collected in this capsular space and will include not only waste materials, but some beneficial materials as well. Keep in mind that filtration in these glomerular capillaries is going to be driven by the same forces as fluid exchange in any capillaries. So the fluids are going to want to move from a high pressure to a low pressure, which is why, that afferent arteriole bringing more fluid in is going to create a pressure gradient where you have a higher pressure coming into the afferent arteriole than you have leaving the efferent arteriole. And so that's going to help push that filtrate out of the glomerulus and into that capsular space. So the amount of filtrate that's formed per minute by both kidneys should be between about 100 to 125 milliliters of filtrate per minute. Now we know that only a very small portion of this filtrate will actually be turned into urine and eliminated or removed from the body. About 99% of that filtrate that's formed will be reabsorbed, because remember, you're going to have a lot of water and glucose and other types of nutrients that you're going to want to retain. And so a lot of that material will be reabsorbed into the bloodstream. So all in all, we make about 1 to 2 liters of urine per day, and that urine should really only for the most part contain the nitrogenous waste and any other electrolytes or materials that we are looking to remove from the body. Now, sometimes people with high blood pressure can have problems with their kidneys because higher blood pressure in the glomerular capillaries can, make the kidneys really vulnerable to high blood pressure. That high pressure can cause damage to the glomerular capillaries. It can cause them to rupture even if the pressure becomes too high, and that can lead to scarring in the kidneys. It can also lead to diminishing of blood supply within the kidneys, and that could eventually lead to renal failure. So maintaining a healthy blood pressure is really important, not only for your heart, but for your kidneys as well, because if the blood pressure is too high, it can cause damage to the nephrons within the kidneys, those functional units. So now let's look at how glomerular filtration is regulated. So why is it important to regulate glomerular filtration? Well, for one, if the filtration rate is too high, then that means the fluid is going to flow through the tubule too quickly, and it's going to cause us it's going to prevent us from being able to reabsorb enough water and solutes from that fluid. And so we're going to end up losing a lot of excess water if that happens. And we could also lose excess electrolytes that we might normally want to retain. So again, if the filtration rate is too high or too fast, the fluid is going to flow through those tubules, and it's going to prevent us from being able to reabsorb things like water and solutes that we might need. Now, in just the opposite, if the filtration rate is too low, that fluid is going to flow more slowly through the tubules, and it could potentially cause us to reabsorb waste materials during that reabsorption process, which we should normally want to eliminate. So this could cause us to accumulate more waste in the blood if that filtration rate is too slow. It's not going to allow us to be able to filter the blood properly. So in order to avoid both of these problems, we have regulatory functions set in place by the neural system. So neural functions, meaning the nervous system, controls this. We have hormonal controls of this, and we have local mechanisms that help control the glomerular blood pressure. So let's look at the neural control first. The sympathetic nervous system, which is our fight or flight branch of our nervous system, actually innervates the kidneys. And so if you are in a sympathetic response, if you are in a fight or flight response, if you're exercising, if you're really afraid for some reason, this is when this branch of the nervous system will kick in, and it will actually cause the afferent arterioles to constrict, which will reduce the glomerular filtration rate and reduce urine output, right? It's going to kind of slow down the flow of that fluid and reduce urine output. And so this is going to help us conserve water in a fight or flight response, which is going to be important because water is one of our necessary things that we have to be able to survive. So we have excess water that we can use for metabolism and for production of energy and all of those good things in our cells. It's also going to redirect blood from other less vital organs at that point in time to skeletal muscles, where it's going to be more urgently needed because either we're exercising or maybe we're fighting for our life if we're in a fight or flight response. So we want the oxygen and nutrients from our blood to really be directed to our skeletal muscles during that time, rather than to other organs where it's not necessarily needed as much. Along with that, we also have hormones that can control glomerular filtration rate. One of those is the renin-angiotensin system. So this starts with the production of renin by our kidneys whenever our blood pressure drops. So if your blood pressure gets too low, the kidneys will start to secrete renin. That renin will then get converted or converts the plasma protein angiotensin or angiotensinogen into angiotensin 1. So angiotensin 1 will then get converted into angiotensin 2 by an enzyme that's found in the lungs called angiotensin converting enzyme, or ACE. Once that's produced, that angiotensin 2 can restore fluid volume and blood pressure. So let's look at how it does that. So when angiotensin 2 is produced, it's going to cause you to feel thirsty. It's going to encourage water intake because it's going to stimulate the hypothalamus of the brain to, those thirst receptors within the hypothalamus of the brain to want to take a drink of water, want to increase your water intake. This hormone is also going to stimulate the adrenal cortex, your adrenal gland that we talked about in the endocrine system, to secrete aldosterone. Aldosterone, remember, is there to help you retain sodium, which will also help you retain water. Along with that, it's going to also stimulate your posterior pituitary gland to secrete antidiuretic hormone. This is also going to promote water retention, and both aldosterone and antidiuretic hormone will decrease urine production because they're going to cause you to retain more water and prevent you from releasing that water in the form of urine. So here you can see, angiotensin being produced by the liver. Renin, which is produced by the kidneys, will stimulate this angiotensinogen to be converted into angiotensin 1. That angiotensin 1 will then be converted into angiotensin 2 thanks to ACE, which is found in the lungs. And then that angiotensin 2 can stimulate the hypothalamus to cause you to feel thirsty. It can stimulate vasoconstriction of your blood vessels, causing them to get smaller. And it can stimulate the production of aldosterone by the adrenal gland, which allows you to retain sodium and retain water. And all of these things together will help elevate your blood pressure, raise your blood pressure back to where it should be. So the angiotensin 2 overall is going to make you feel thirsty. It's going to cause you to, retain water, retain sodium in order to get that blood pressure back up. Along with that, it's also going to cause vasoconstriction, as I just mentioned. Vasoconstriction causes the blood vessels to be smaller, to get smaller in diameter, which increases the peripheral resistance in those blood vessels, and so that's going to cause the blood pressure to go up because of that as well. So constriction of the efferent arteriole more than the afferent arteriole is going to help sustain glomerular pressure and filtration whenever your blood pressure is low. If we constrict that efferent arteriole, make it even smaller, it's going to help essentially increase the pressure gradient within the nephron so that we have a higher pressure coming in, even more so than that pressure leaving the nephron or the glomerulus. We also have local control of the glomerular filtration rate through renal autoregulation. So here, this is where the nephron is able to adjust their own blood flow and glomerular filtration rate. So this is going to enable the nephron to maintain a relatively stable rate during arterial blood pressure changes. So whether the blood pressure rises or falls, the nephron will be able to maintain a stable glomerular filtration rate. And the way that it does this is if blood pressure rises, it stretches that afferent arteriole, the one coming in, and that's going to trigger a vasoconstriction reflex. And so that's going to prevent there from being too much blood flowing into the glomerulus at that point in time. If the blood pressure falls, the afferent arteriole relaxes, opens up a little bit to prevent us from not having enough blood flowing into the glomerulus at that point in time. So now looking at the juxtaglomerular apparatus, this is a group of sensory cells near the nephron loop. that is going to help monitor the flow rate and monitor the osmolarity of that tubular fluid. And so there's two cell types found in the juxtaglomerular apparatus. You have the macula densa and the granular cells. So the macula densa, you can see here, these are the epithelial cells on the outside of the nephron loop. And then the granular cells are smooth muscle cells that are on the afferent arteriole. And so when these get stimulated by the macula, they can dilate or constrict the arteriole depending on what's going on. And this can, change the pressure gradient coming into or leaving that glomerulus. These granular cells here are also the ones that secrete renin that I just talked about previously with that renin-angiotensin system. So these are going to play a big role in helping regulate the glomerular filtration rate, or the cells of this juxtaglomerular apparatus.